Speed on the what?
We're down at Abbey Road Studios. For those that wish to exist, came out yesterday, so we're going to talk through the record and some of the themes and lyrics, etc., with the guys from Architects.
Wonderful.
Minus Adam,
Who is...
in Canada because of COVID-19,
You didn't want to fly him over.
the pandemic.
I understand this. So the album opener acts as very much like a roadmap for where the record's going to go, I think. It's really super symphonic because one of the elements that has really come forward, that, like as soon as I heard the album when you sent me it, was that there's two things that are really jumped forward in the band's sound, and that is the orchestral elements to it and also the electronica, which I think's both of which play such a huge part in the record. I think the balance between those two things is amazing because obviously one is super organic and the other is all the programming. You Dream of Armageddon is, as the opener, feels like a curtain raising almost in very cinematic terms to where the album is going to go. So tell me a bit about the writing of that.
I think it just wanted to set the mood for the record. Obviously, there's no other tracks really like that, but yeah, you're right in saying that it's sort of a curtain raiser for the record, like a you know, the titles at the start of a movie or something like that, you know. But it was originally, the origins of that piece came from another song actually that was going to also be an intro to the album, but because we were originally going to do a double record, there was going to be two intros to each side of the record, if you like, and they were both sort of related musically. But yeah, that was the second one, and I mean, it's obviously, you know, inspired by various composers that do film scores, and you know, I don't think it takes too much of a guess to know who those composers are. But yeah, I think we wanted to do something like that for a while. Something to we've been reluctant to do, you know, intro tracks to a record. Sometimes if you take it too slow and then you try to bring it to a live show, it can be a bit of a mood kill if you get it wrong. You know, it can kind of take the energy or that initial rush of excitement and adrenaline out of the show. But I think this will sort of serve as a good opening when we eventually come back to touring as well.
I think we didn't change the vocals too much either, actually. I think a lot of, from the first sort of demos, a lot of the changes were musically changed on that, weren't they?
Yeah.
The sort of melody stayed the same from the first sort of demo we did to it.
Yeah, I think originally that I was imagining maybe Dead Butterflies would be the second track on the album, and so I think I shifted the tempo up a little bit to match Dead Butterflies, and I changed the key so it was the same as Dead Butterflies, so they would flow nicely, and then we didn't do that.
I think the thing that's cool as well is I think if you're starting a record like that, it has to sound like it's actually happening. You know, it's interesting on this one because obviously the arrangements have got grander, but also actually the orchestras that we've been working with have got bigger, and it's really nice to sort of bring that to the forefront and kind of, as you say, like show where the record's going from the first listen.
I think one of the tricky things normally when you're trying to mix synths or orchestra with the acoustic instruments is when it comes to the mix, you have to dial back a lot of the frequencies in those extra elements. Otherwise, it dwarfs the band. Yeah. Whereas on this track, obviously, we didn't have the band playing, so it meant that we could go really, really big with it, which is something I've wanted to do for a while. But lyrically, it's really like, yeah, it's like a little blurb for the record almost, you know. It's kind of just saying we're in a pickle and we're all in it together, you know. I was just trying to say this situation we're in. It's all of our problems, you know, whether we like it or not, and so we ought to solve it together.
Yeah, I think that the "We All Fall in Parallel" lyric makes that most apparent, because it's saying, regardless of what you do, where you are, whatever your standing is, we're all going. It's something that's going to happen to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, and I was also sort of touching upon some themes, I think, leading on from Holy Hell. The initial line is a Carl Jung quote, and the line is, "No tree can grow to heaven till its roots." What is it?
Till its roots reach down to hell.
Yeah, that's right. I remember writing it. Yeah. Well, I remember copying it from Carl anyway.
I'm quite
But
impressed.
yeah,
I remember
that was kind of leading on from Holy Hell, because the theme of Holy Hell was very much, you know, finding the virtue in the challenges in our life, the difficult situations, and I suppose this is one of those situations. You know, we are in you know, there is this crisis developing, if you like, and it's obviously a really terrible situation that could become really, really bad, but it's also maybe an opportunity to do things better, you know, and build a better world than what we have currently.
Yeah, I think that it's a very fine line, isn't it, when you're making any kind of art to address those things without actually coming across as being self-righteous and preaching, because
100%.
yeah, because it's just gonna piss people off straight away
immediately.
And I have no clue what I'm talking about as
I
well.
think
Like,
it's relatable in the sense of, like, you're not pointing the finger and saying you need to do this or why aren't you doing this. It would be absolutely ridiculous to be like that when you're not being like that. And when we're not the perfect article, it's just sort of, I think what's interesting is that you can listen to this and really it feels like a we rather than you, or more us rather than why.
yeah, and I wanted it to be more about self-accountability and really looking at myself and asking myself why I'm not doing more, rather than blaming other people. And obviously there are people which are easy to blame, but I think on an individual level we can also all do better as well.
Yeah.
Except maybe Greta, she's doing as much as she can. But, you know, broadly speaking, we can all do much, much better than we are currently doing, and that definitely includes myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's the overarching theme of the record, isn't it? I think that's the thing that jumps out most of all is the fact that it's not like a manual or a toolkit. It's just more a case of pointing out what these things are, and it feels quite self-destructive at times because of that, because it's so introspective. But I think that's also the thing that makes it so relatable.
I think it's more of like, it feels like a commentary, almost like a diary of, from my point of view, of sort of what was happening around the world with Dan looking around. And it's like almost like a diary entry, I think. And I think that's what makes it really relatable, not just to all of us that are in the band, but everyone that's hearing it can relate to it.
Well, and I think, you know, you mentioned the self-destruction, and that's something that does come up throughout the record, and we'll probably speak about that some more, that I felt on a personal level that there was self-destructive tendencies in my life, and that I identified in everyone. I mean, we all know how hard it is to do the things that we know that are good for us, and that's just the microcosm, isn't it, of the macro, which is what we're doing to the planet.
Right, let's talk about Black Lungs. That's the first proper, I guess, moment on the record where it's where the band's playing and it sets the stall out, I guess. I think the other, with the intro, that's kind of, as we said, feels like a curtain rising on everything, and then Black Lungs is the moment where it really all kicks off. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell me a bit about the writing of that.
That was one of the first ones to be written. And I think I remember, like, we had spoken about, you know, working in different keys and stuff. Like, Sam was perfect every night on tour, but, like, just singing at the top of his range, just due to the fact that the tuning that the band was in. So it was time to, you know, experiment with some of the tuning stuff. And didn't really want to go any lower than we were, which was super low. So trying to go higher and still feel heavy and thick and big like Architects does. I was messing around with, like, an octave pedal at the rehearsals for the last tour we did, which was, like, December 2018 now, which is years ago. And just trying to come up with a riff. I think, like, me and Dan had spoken about, you know, where to go on the record, and Dan was just like, just go weird, and we need to just go to places we haven't been. So just trying to approach riffs and stuff in a slightly different perspective, and just try and make stuff that's a little bit quirkier and like fits in well with the electronic side of the band. Like try and view riffs as if they're like synth riffs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What would you do to stay alive if the planet was burning?
I think it was very much about trying to do more with less. You know, obviously, historically, we've been a very technical band, and it's been very busy musically, which is absolutely fine and something that, you know, we feel very competent in. But I felt like the challenge on this was to just try and, do more with less. But that becomes like a whole other challenge, because
It's so much harder.
the less you do, the more likely it's already been done, or it gets boring or repetitive. So it was more of a challenge to sort of come across those riffs that felt memorable and impactful and exciting without, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's really challenging for like writing riffs like that. I think there's a really fine line between a really good, catchy, memorable riff and a really bad
Pub rock.
my first riff ever type thing. And like trying to, you know, ride that, no, not ride the line, but just trying to make sure you're on the right side of that line is kind of tough.
I feel like you know straight away though when it's right. I mean, speaking personally, I remember when Josh first played as this, and it's one of the few songs you've written where I feel like you've played it and we've actually all been there in the dressing room on tour when we were in Germany, and it was like instantaneous. Like, okay, you got one there, you caught one, you know. Yeah. So when you know.
I think it's a really good way to start the record as well. I think, like Dan said, like with the first song, Lifting the Curtain, and that riff and that energy straight away, I think is a really good, because we were discussing like having Dead Butterflies there, but I think, that immediate bounce and that immediate like big boy riff was really, really important. I remember speaking to actually a few friends and showing them this demo, and them calling the songs like the riff, and like it definitely felt like oh wow, we've really got a massive one here.
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit, I suppose safe wouldn't be a great word to use, but it's got some more familiar elements than some of the other tracks, and I think had we gone in straight away with Dead Butterflies, it perhaps wouldn't have been, you know, you need that rush of adrenaline, I think, near the start, especially given what the band is, you know. If we had gone in too soft, it might not have worked so well. So it felt like the perfect,
Also, I think in terms of like just the album as a whole, like trying to simplify what the band is doing to a degree, but it's still such a densely layered album with like sounds just all over the place. It's so musically like rich that it's definitely not just like really straightforward listening. It's the songs feel like really, you know, easy to get into, but you'll notice things probably like on your 10th listen that you never heard before and that kind of thing, which is cool.
Yeah, for sure. In the moments where it feels like everything's dropped away, there's still so much going on. Like the mix is amazing, by the way. He's smashed it.
This one was tricky. I feel like we had to tinker with the mix on this one a little bit more than the others. I think that, you know, we were trying to make it a little bit more lively, weren't we, and a little bit more aggressive. We brought up the overheads and things like that. We even like time stretched the entire song and made it very slightly faster, because it just felt like it didn't have the hit I was sort of looking for.
We boosted the kick on this as well to make it more sort of like punchy as well. I remember.
Yeah, there was some tinkering and some late structural changes. We changed it the way it went into the last chorus after the breakdown, and there was a few sort of last minute things that it was just off, and it all came together in the end.
I feel like it's going to be a really great way to start the set as well.
Yeah.
Sort of build into the sort of excitement. I think if you were a fan and were at the show and you could sort of hear that riff coming in, you'd be like, oh, okay, right, I'm ready to go.
Just the idea of going to a show at this point is so bizarre.
It would be so good.
We could be rubbish and it'd still be great.
One thing that aside from how dense and layered the album is musically is the fact that it's very self-referential. So there are moments that point to other songs within this record, but also a lot of stuff that points back to the older records as well within the lyrics.
Yeah,
and we'll go into that a little bit later as they come up. But Black Lungs for me, it feels like that's one of those points where the lyric about the Judas steer that we can deify, and that's the idea of like the cattle that would lead the other cattle into the slaughterhouse,
Yes.
which also made me think it kind of references Libertine, where it's like we are the rust worshipping the rain, because it's like an awareness that these things are happening, but it's almost like not a powerlessness to act on it. It's just
Yeah, I mean, the whole record
Comfort.
is sort of like, there's so many references to that sort of irrational, illogical apathy we have towards our sort of impending doom, you know, because we're wired to survive at all costs, and yet even when we have sort of a serious danger telegraphed to us, we have these warnings. We still don't do anything, and humans typically do wait for the 11th hour to make the changes that are needed. You know, we see it in people's individual lives. You know, we don't make the changes, you know, the lifestyle changes that we need until the doctor says, you know, it's now or never. And sort of, I definitely felt like we see that on a large scale. So yeah, a lot of the album is just asking the question, why, what makes us do that? I was really me asking myself, what makes me do it? Why do I sit around and wait? Why is apathy so delicious?
Yeah, but it's something that you've been talking about for a long time. Like even in that song where the Sleeping in the Hurricane lyric tying back to Royal Beggars on Holy Hell, it's like an ongoing theme. So I think that's one of the things that I like about it, that as soon as I started to then pick through it and get into it more, the way it is self-referential, it becomes like, it's almost like canon, do you know what I mean, with what your band does, which is one of the things why I think that when there's these huge musical leaps from what your band has done up to this point, I mean, not really, because they've always been kind of like incremental steps towards this record, but those moments lyrically and thematically tie back to the other stuff, so it feels like it's not adrift.
Well, and the nice thing about being self-referential like that to older material, older songs, is that I can have one line, and within that line, it can be referencing a whole concept that people are, okay, I know that they're talking about that, and I don't have to go into it anymore. So I can say a lot with very little, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This is the first example of how far some of these new elements have gone. Aside from the opener, because obviously the orchestral elements, but with the verses in Giving Blood, where it's very synth driven.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, bringing that into the sound.
I love this song, I think, because of how interesting it is, and it was really surprising seeing this one unfold, because initially the song started without any guitars on it, so it was a song that Dan had written with the synths, and something that we'd worked on a lot was the chorus at the start, and watching it develop and come together and almost be this sort of what we thought was a complete song before there was any guitars on it. But then actually when Josh put the guitars down on this song, it elevated it to a completely different level. I remember hearing the first lead at the start and just feeling like it was a really sort of like iconic moment. Like I feel like it would be like a thing in it if we were playing it at a festival, like it would start with that for a while and build the crowd's excitement. But it was really showing off. I felt like both sides of what Dan and Josh are really good at, and both of them doing it completely separately, but just showing how together they work so great.
Yeah, I think this song is... we talk about the orchestration and the synths taking more of a central role in the music, and the reason for that is that a lot of the origins of these songs began with just synths or just a string part, and this is one of those songs. So, like Sam said, the guitars came in last, and I mean, I think that's partly down to me writing something and wanting to have vocals on it to sort of for it to make sense before Josh heard it. And I think I was still, I'm still relatively new to writing songs, to be honest. And so for me, it was I wanted to have it more fleshed out with vocals, and so I could present it to Josh with confidence, basically. So it wasn't because without the vocals are so important to like I said before, what we do normally is so complicated musically, and I was really creating something relatively simple, albeit very different for us. So yeah, Josh ended up having this once everything else was on there, which is obviously just like backwards for us in a normal situation or any other record, any other song we'd written. But yeah, it's still the guitars, but all the excitement for me as soon as the guitars were on, I was like, now this like totally makes sense. This has gone from being like, okay, this is cool, to being like, okay, this is a great song. This has got to be on the record. And
That's nice.
I've tried complimenting Josh for this before, and he was like, it's just simple.
Yeah, but it's an interesting one that this is the way that the album has been written, obviously, under these circumstances, because it's, to actually make a finished record like this is quite a really different way of working for most people. I'm sure it is for you guys as well.
It was just made on the internet, wasn't it? I remember listening to this walking on the beach in Australia, actually. I was on the other side of the world to you, like this, my phone, trying to hide from my wife and daughter, like, oh, this is good, this is going to be good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I haven't actually really spoken much about this one lyrically, and I think it's because it will probably annoy people to a degree. I think it maybe it seems a little bit cryptic, I don't know. But yeah, I think writing this song, I thought, I was coming to terms with the fact that there was going to be material on the record that wasn't going to sit well with some people, and that some people were going to write on the internet that they hoped we were dead and stuff. And so and they have. And so I started writing these sort of like tongue-in-cheek things about what people might say and
preempt it.
Yeah,
I remember doing that.
Bit.
I remember when we were doing that, it was actually quite exciting. We were having a laugh with it in the studio, and I think that was really like a cool moment, because it was like, oh, this is like a new thing that we're doing as well, not just this sort of sound. It was a like extension of sort of like our personalities as people, and kind of being like, oh, how do we deliver this? Like, how does this work? And I love coming out of that second verse and going into that falsetto part, because it's almost like so here's your eulogy, and then it just being like, well, this is a really soft bit. If you're like just moaning and then being like, enjoy this.
And I suppose this song is thematically a sidestep from the rest of the record because of that. I don't know if it was necessarily, it was preemptive to a degree, but I was also seeing other bands that we're close with getting slaughtered for really just writing the music they wanted to write, and I started to think about that relationship between people that make music and then people that digest music, and what are the roles there? Because obviously some fans think they have a different role, I think, to how the artists might view their role. And it's difficult to talk about without, upsetting people. So I guess just read the lyrics and get upset with them that way.
Okay, so Discourse Is Dead is the next track on the record, but it's also the title says everything, I think. It's the most obvious one that's saying that a lot of critical thinking and discussion has kind of been crushed by knee-jerk righteousness, I guess.
Stand on the tip of the wind, gotta watch where you tread. Round up the you mustn't sit in the shade, 'cause it's blessed from us until I'm set free. We're all sisters and brothers, but
I really didn't want to be finger pointing on the record. So this is the only song that really does that, but it's different in that it's pointing the finger at basically everybody, I think.
Yeah.
Not entirely, but yeah, the discourse surrounding, I mean, I was really thinking of politics in this, but it surrounds everything. It's just our inability to have a civil conversation with someone who holds an opposing view to our own, and just how tiring that's become. And you know, it's very easy for us as a left-leaning band to sort of point the finger at the right and blame them for everything. But I mean, I had felt more frustrated with the left while I was, well, just generally when I was working on the record. Just, you know, we're just sort of, there's a lot of, you know, gunning for the highest moral ground and really not. I think there's an opportunity for the left to sort of accept that there are minor differences between us, but to actually put them aside and just work together and have a civil conversation with each other and understand that, yeah, okay, well, we might have some slight differences, but we can still work together. I mean, and that works universally as well. You know, again, this is like, even saying this is a difficult kind of point of view to have, because people will say, well, no, you have to sort of, you know, punch a Nazi or whatever, you know, like there's sort of lots of different shades to this, and I'm not really, I don't really have like an absolute view on it, and I would, you know, what I really need to do is have conversations with people about this type of thing, but it's so difficult to even do that, you know.
Yeah, well, it says that in the lyrics about biting your tongue. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and
I
sort of each
through.
verse is kind of having to go at one wing, you know. The first verse was really getting quite specific about the sort of Christianity's role in conservatism. That's why the line about, you know, do you really think that Christ is a capitalist, and let thy neighbour drown, and then the second verse was really about the left. You know, I always think of the left as being more inclusive and understanding, but it's just not the case. Which is, you know, the last line is, "We're all sisters and brothers, but if you're one of the others, then fuck you." Because that's what it feels like. You know, we're all friends. You know, and then it's like, well, no, you have a slightly different point of view to you, so, you know.
At home, like, people don't want to talk to Tories on our side now. The conversation is not available, even if you want to have it. If someone on the right wants to have it, then the left don't listen.
You know, and I can already hear the comment section of just this conversation. You know, the fury in it.
It's running through my head now.
It's so difficult. It's so taboo, and that, yeah, I mean, and isn't that ironic? I mean, that is just sums up why I felt the need to write the song. But sonically, it's much more familiar for fans. I think it was the first song we wrote.
It's the oldest.
I looked in the demo, the date on it was May 2018.
Yeah. So that was, obviously way before Holy Hell was out.
Like 5 months before Holy Hell was out, yeah.
So that's obviously why it's the one that is the gap between the two different albums, I think.
Yeah.
That was the first. Hello. That was the first vocal we tracked for the record as well.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like I can't remember what we were doing, but we were recording some vocals for something, and I thought, oh, I've just
I feel like it was in the same place that we tracked the vocals for Holy Hell.
Yeah,
I had
just finished. Yeah, we had just finished with doing something. Me and Josh had just finished putting the song together, and I just had the idea for that chorus.
Was it done during one of the evenings, or maybe the day before, like a pre-pro day? Because I remember your drums were set up in the room as well, and we had the room. Yeah, but it was really exciting. It felt. Immediately felt really catchy, and immediately was in my head.
And it was the first time we had sort of tried doing something with you singing in that key for years and years and years, and it felt like we had sort of learnt so much in those years that we could bring to this. So a lot of people sort of think that Sam sounds very, very different. It's just that he's just singing at a lower register. That's it, really.
I think that was it as well. That was sort of like an eye-opener moment, because it was like, okay, I can sing down there, and now we know that this is possible. we can write some more songs in this sort of key and move forward. And I've learned a lot more about my voice, so I could sort of deliver it with some conviction and make sure that I was giving it enough personality as well.
Yeah, because I think whenever you make any kind of record, you have those moments that are like the cornerstones that you build from, and you get one song in place, and you're like, okay, well now we know that we can grow out from this point.
Exactly. That was the
it's
foundation.
interesting that that is one of the oldest songs and the one that is the most, if you did like a blind test and played the songs off the album to somebody prior to it coming out, that's probably the one that obviously people are going to, are going to go, oh, that's Architects.
Yeah,
But
I had felt such a strong inclination after we finished Holy Hell that we needed to diversify and broaden our horizons and go somewhere new, and I was kind of desperate for it at that point. And so after we finished this song, I think that was kind of the point when we spoke, and I kind of felt, okay, well, this is a good foundation. We have something, again, for lack of a better word, safe, something I know that fans are going to, I don't think many Architects fans will dislike this song, and obviously we want to make songs that fans enjoy, but most of all we want to make songs that excite us. And I felt like, okay, this is really cool. This is a really, really strong metal Architects song, but let's go somewhere else now. And we can come back to this if we feel the need to, but let's go and do something different. We were early in the process, like I was saying, 5 months before Holy Hell was out. So we were at a point where we could just do anything. And maybe it wouldn't end up on the record, but let's just do whatever we want and just go wherever it takes us. Because I think most people that have ever pursued anything creative, you can guide it to a degree, but you don't have total control of what happens. And that sounds really pretentious, but it is true. You can't just decide what you want it to be, and it's just bring it to life, and it's exactly as is. There's other things at play, especially when you're collaborating. So yeah, this was that point when I thought, okay, now let's go somewhere. Let's see where we end up, and then if we need to look back and wind it in a bit, we can.
This still felt like a departure from me with some of the elements that we were bringing in, but it was still sort of close enough to what we've been doing before that it was like, okay, we don't go any further back than this. Like, this is the closest we get to that sort of style of what we were doing, but we're still bringing in these elements. But now that's there, let's go forward and let's try other stuff, like Dan said. And if we need to, we can pull back to this sort of safer ground.
Because if you listen to the other heavy tracks, like Impermanence or Goliath, they're really heavy, but they're still a departure, I think, from our previous material.
It's not enough. Why does the feelings taste so bittersweet? I just want to live.
Having said about these moments where it's self-referential, I mean, the most obvious thing that any fan is going to see straight away is the reference to Memento Mori in the second verse, where it says, I just want to live and die in peace. But it's done with a very different intention in this song.
And again, well, like I was saying previously in Black Lungs, is the great thing about being self-referential like that is you can say a lot with very little. So I'm not using that phrase in the way that Tom used it. It's more me referencing what we went through with Tom. And, Memento Mori kind of encapsulates that entire experience for obvious reasons. So Dead Butterflies is a lot about me feeling lost and getting caught up in triviality and some at times not really seeing a way back, to happiness. And that line was me sort of going, okay, remember, get some perspective, try and find perspective here. Remember what Tom went through, what you've been through with Tom, and let that help me be guided back to, I don't know, a sense of groundedness, I suppose.
That line as well is super interesting because I didn't even think about the fact that it was from Memento until till that song was released. which reminds me a lot of what happened when we were writing Memento. It was really interesting the way that Tom would work with me. Almost, we would do it section by section, and I would get, you know, he would really get me excited with like my vocal delivery. So I wouldn't be thinking about the words. It would just be like, this performance sounds great. Like if you do it like this, you're going to sound like this. And I know you love this band. And it was interesting, like that line coming up again and it almost passing me by for a second time, even though we discussed it at the time and saying like, it's really cool that we're referencing things that we had done previously. When the song came out and the video came out and I started seeing people talking about it, I was like, how have I forgotten? Like, how has this gone past me? And I feel like sometimes it's important to have that in some respects, because I'm so focused on the delivery and so focused on making it sound as good as I possibly can, that if I was super emotional the whole time, it would be difficult to really focus on the job that I'm trying to do. So you have to let a little bit in and still remain focused. But it was I find the song so interesting and so bold, and the way that it's connected with fans is unbelievable, really. I think it was one of the songs when we did the Royal Albert Hall show that we were all a bit sort of, I wonder how this is going to go down, and are we going to get slaughtered for it? Like, if people are going to, I thought
it'd be videos online of like piles of burning CDs.
Yeah,
this one.
And it's immediately felt like a really important song and a really important step for the band, and maybe made people be like, okay, like I really respect what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And yeah, I just think it's a really impressive song, and I'm just really, out of all the songs, I'm really proud of how that we managed to deliver it.
Again, this is just a song that started as just some MIDI strings and some MIDI brass, and then sort of adding the band afterwards was not the afterthought, but I don't think I was even trying to write an Architect song. I was just playing around, on Logic, and just sort of stumbled across the music. That's kind of what writing music is a little bit, isn't it? Yeah. I always think, sort of, you're always at some point making it up as you go along, and then it's, and there it is out of nowhere. Where did that come from?
I think that mid-late riff is really cool. I think the way that comes in and sort of gives you that moment of like, almost like a slap around the face. I remember hearing that and being like, wow, Josh has really struck gold.
Yeah, because the song's like lots of peaks and troughs, really. It's like really dynamic, and it's constantly hitting with this big grand orchestral piece, but it coming in with that riff and being more of that. It's not really typically Architects, is it? But it's chunky, it's heavy, it's.
There was already a riff there. I mean, like Dan had like the song that was done in. I said, how about this riff? In the riff section, but
No, and again, it was one of those nice things where it was a missing puzzle piece. Again, like this is the first time where I had started songs, and then Josh had brought his influence onto a song I had started, which has never happened before, and that was something that I really enjoyed.
Me too. It's really like I've not had that much before in the past in Architects or anything, and it's just like. Just so nice to just react off something and not worry about the start of a song, and just react. And usually what I do on the first try is the best thing that I've done.
I don't boast.
Well, not the best thing,
Usually
but the best
time.
out of all the things I try. Like the Giving Blood lead was like the first thing I did. I just picked up the guitar. I tried a few others, but I was like, well, that's the best one.
There's something about that
Same
spontaneity,
exactly,
isn't it?
yeah.
I mean,
it's very honest, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think, and
100%.
letting those things appear.
I always find that when we're working with melody for the vocals, it's always better just reacting instantly off the music rather than like having it for months and going, right, now we're going to work on the vocals. And you might have just had one sort of half-baked idea that's rubbish, that's stuck in your head and it's hard to move past. Whereas if you're very reactionary and spontaneous, it's usually there's something a little bit more special about that. So that, like, building that dynamic between me and Josh, it's something that's still evolving and changing all the time, and it's something that we had to very quickly come to terms with on Holy Hell. But it's still, we're still learning about the way each other work, and for me, it was really nice sort of starting that dynamic because because Josh has got much more songwriting experience than me, so it was great.
I think
having that at
I
my
also
disposal.
would notice, like, I find myself doing things that maybe you had done, or like getting stems from you and hearing like one thing on a track, like that's something that I do a bit, and like we sort of like our way of
Like
writing, sort of like
cross-pollination
rubbing off
going
each
on.
other, maybe, yeah, which is cool.
Yeah. Do you find that when you're writing, you're well, you've said it's happening already, but that's not a conscious thing? No, you're not like, oh, what would go here normally? Do you know what I mean?
No, I try and feel like I try and go back to like the feeling of being like a 14-year-old kid discovering like the bands that really excited me as a kid.
Yeah.
And just like some sort of mind. I normally I'll like stand up with a guitar on like it's a show and just, I mean, it probably sounds really cringy, but like that
No.
that's like just tapping into like more of a physical reaction.
Yeah.
I guess.
That's what writing music is, though. The whole, because you can write music for days and days, can't you? But it's all about the filter. What is allowed in, you know, and that's comes from your gut, your intuition, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's the difficult sort of situation that artists like us find ourselves in when you want to change. You're creating something and it makes you feel something. So do you deny it on the basis that some people might not feel comfortable with it? You can't. You just have to.
Yeah.
You just have to go with it because you're reacting from something really primal and honest and something that's like totally true, for lack of a better word, to you. And it's really hard to sort of ignore that voice.
I think a good thing with parts like that are where me and Ali come in, we're sort of like the ears of architects, and we've been around it so long and are so used to knowing what those feelings are, especially because we're not writing, but we just know that emotion and where that emotion needs to be and when that emotion becomes too similar. That when we heard this, when we started working on this, it felt like a real, like, this is a really interesting song.
Well, it wasn't going to be a single, was it?
No.
Initially, but I think we all loved it so much that we felt that it did need to be pushed, and I guess we were a little bit worried about how it might go down or if it would alienate fans or whatever. But I think it was the right move to make.
I think for everything we've ever done, it always has to be signed off by all of us. It has to be if this is going on the record, the majority of us all need to be like, I think this is really great. I think this is really special. And I think it's nice having that sort of dynamic with the writers and the non-writers and with how they're so open to actual conversation. It's not like you can say like, oh, I don't know if I'm really feeling this. And then immediately they're like, well, fuck you, it's going on. You know, it's like, okay, well, where can we take this? Like, where do you think it should go? It's a really nice balance, I think. And I think something that, as Dan and Josh said, is ongoing, and we're all learning how to be with each other.
I think Josh has slightly different tastes to us three, maybe. At the end of the day, we all kind of get on the same page, but what you bring to the band now is like something we've never had before. Whereas the three of us have all been kind of working together for years, and we generally just agree on stuff and generally kind of follow each other's lead with it. But when you offer something to the group, it's something very fresh and
it's
changes the
weird
sound.
for me as well, like stepping into the group and being the new guy, but a guy that's writing. So like, I can't be like, this is where we're going. Mm-hmm. But also, I mean, a lot of this album was literally like experimenting, and like I would be like, I know this is weird. I'm well aware that this will probably get scrapped, but like, let's just see what happens. Like, you might as well explore everything. So I often send stuff over being like, I know this is odd. I know this might not work, but let's see.
That's awesome, though, to actually do that, because I think that if, personally for me, I'd probably be so wary about pushing the ideas that seemed like the ones that really would be pushing the boat out. But that's awesome. And I think that's something that makes the record so great.
Because we're all such good friends, we're so aware almost of the way that each of us is different, but we treat each other with kindness. So it's not, if something isn't up your street, or if something feels too far or too weird, we have ways of speaking to each other that we know that it's coming from a good place. It's never coming from a like horrible, like, you're wrong and I don't want you to try and do this again. It's like, well, it just didn't hit this time. And then when it does, it's like, that's the one.
This is one of the ones, obviously, where we were talking earlier about putting things forward that might have felt like a real step further than the band had gone before with certain elements. I think the verse of this one does that a lot. It made me think of a bunch of bands. Not that it rips them off, but in that ilk. And I was curious that you were saying that when you put things forward to the group almost as like, I can't imagine that you sit there like a committee and go, right, here's the minutes for today, this song here, and then everyone votes on it. But what are the moments where there was the most amount of discussion about, can we go this far with this? Should we make this more like this? Or
a lot of the time it's like Dan will get something together, whether it has been with Josh or Josh has sent something to Dan or vice versa. And then those sort of discussions normally start when I'm tracking vocals, like when we're demoing. So when you get to that stage, it's like, okay, how do you feel about this? Or we'll do a verse and then be like, and listen back to it and be like, sit on it for a little bit. And then you can extend on that if it feels right, I think. That's not, normally the most eccentric parts of the record have been through discussions and through sort of trial and error, I think, and just not being afraid to, like Josh has said previously, not being afraid to send stuff or try stuff that might feel a little bit weird, because I think there's a really fine line between too weird and fantastic. And I think you only know through trial and error, don't you?
We all sort of rein each other in as well on it. If an idea is kind of outrageous, and maybe like, it's been a number of times when you've sent stuff and said, is this too far? And generally, we're all just happy to go with it because it's not too far. Like, it's genius. But we've all been keen to push it on this album and not just, knock out another Holy Hell, because that could have been very easy to do, I think.
I feel like with An Ordinary Extinction, this song never felt particularly risky because it's down-tuned and heavy, and it puts Sam's voice at a very familiar pitch as well. And actually, usually when we have something that's sort of a little outside our normal parameters, we think, well, Sam will sort of tie it together. Sam is the through line. And actually, I feel like in the verses of this song, you hear Sam singing in a different way to what you're used to, even though in the choruses it's very familiar, but in the verses it's not. And actually your voice in those parts of the songs is what makes it a bit unfamiliar almost. So almost did the opposite of what we would normally rely on it to do. But again, we kind of see a lot of these things through to completion, and there was lots of songs that were seen through to completion that didn't make the record. As we mentioned earlier, we were planning on doing a double record, so there were finished songs, and sometimes we just find that either we don't get enough of that familiarity from Sam's voice, but in this case, I actually felt like it pushed us into a new area that was quite refreshing. I mean, I have said quite a lot. I think this is actually arguably the weirdest song on the album in many ways. Obviously, it's really, really heavy, and that will satisfy a lot of fans. But when you actually get into the meat and potatoes of the song, you start to be a bit like, well, this is strange.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one that when I was like, especially like the chorus, like the fact that it's like a swung thing the band hadn't done before, and it has some sort of 90s kind of industrial throwback vibes to it. And I was very prepared, like, to just be like, people were like, no, we're not going there. But I think the great thing about everyone in the band is that even if the first reaction is like someone's not feeling it, everyone's happy to just, well, let's see it through to the end and see where it is as a finished song, and then you can vote on it then. And
Which is so much work
as well. Like we,
which is so much work.
yeah, we really went to town on this chorus as well. There was a lot of different versions of this chorus where me and Dan, we tried it before we went to Bali. We tried it in Bali.
Yeah, changing keys and
getting it sorted. And do you know one of the things that I really enjoy about this song is that massive riff after the middle eight. That it feels like it would have been very easy to just put screaming over it and just shout and it be like this really aggressive part because the riff feels so grandiose. And actually, yeah, it's one of the more timid sort of vocal performances. Really, it's really gentle, but I think that really brings out the massive riff. And actually, the only thing that we have recorded really of us in Bali and us recording is a video of me lying on the bed in that studio, and Dan's daughter Zeffie was really small at the time.
Yeah, you sent that to my
Sent
wife
it to her
yesterday.
yesterday, yeah. of her, us sitting there playing that song, and that going into that bit, Zeffie just stands up. She was lying next to me on the bed, and then she just stands up and just starts going up and down like that. And then we were like, "Well, it's a hit. It's a hit. It's going to get played on." Hey Dougie, we're out of it. We're done.
I think there was an effort in all the songs to not always just do the obvious, because you tend to want to lean into whatever feels is going to be satisfying, and that obviously is nice, but if you tend to always just try and do the satisfying option, you also end up just repeating the same tropes over and over again. And there was an effort from the very start to not be drawn too much to doing what the listener is like, oh, I hear it coming, Often it can feel like the next part is always telegraphed, and you could just, if you're doing a 15-track album, that's going to get really, really, really repetitive and old very quickly. So yeah, doing things like that and trying to juxtapose heaviness with subtlety and lightness.
But then I love where the song ends up as well. It's some of the most ferocious vocals on the record. Yeah. Like the last 10 seconds are really intense, which is nice because it's almost in a spot where the song sort of builds and builds and builds and then drops, and then it's like.
And I think shout out to the choir for that build up in the middle eight, who took that whole section to another level. And I love that the whole song sounds like it's written by Terminator, and then it's got this beautiful choir.
It's
section
really
in the
haunting the way the choir moves there. There's so much movement in it that it really leads. It's like that riff. I love it, Josh. I really love that riff.
Thanks.
Well done, Josh.
Well done, mate.
Little cricket clap. Thanks. So Impermanence. So Impermanence is the first track where a guest is on the record, because there's 3 which we haven't even mentioned yet. So Impermanence is the one with Winston on it. On my notes, I've just put Chef's Kiss for the phrasing in the verses. I think that's one of my favourite bits on the record is the delivery, the way you finish the first couple of lines in the verse.
Suffer.
With the from that register.
We've got a choice, but now we'd rather choose to suffer. Just there's no escape once the fuse is blown. Up to the spontaneous, swimming with concrete shoes. The Reaper jumps to take the best of you. Can you see the writing on the wall?
Musically, it's really propulsive, but then the thing again saying about these things kind of being the light and dark and the shade in things is and playing off each other is there's all these really ethereal elements across something which is really pushed throughout all that, and I think that works super well.
I think it's one of the actually most creative songs vocally on the record, as in terms of what I'm doing. Because there is so many different styles of vocal on that track, but then still Winston manages to bring something really special to it. I think
Yeah.
if you think in the verses, there's the pitching, the really harsh screaming, and then also what I really liked about this song is we brought a lot of the stuff that was happening in the background, the sort of like the R's that are there that really bring something to those verses that make it sort of feel like someone stood behind you as well. And I think that was kind of inspired through. I remember you and me playing or me showing you a thing of like the Beatles tracking, like how when you take or like the instruments away, there was still so much in the background. And also Billie Eilish was doing loads of those sort of ad-lib things, and Dan would almost sort of write these other melodies behind the melodies that were there on the choruses. But I feel like this was one of the first times we brought it into a verse.
Josh, I feel like is there a little bit of you in doing some R's or something in the background in some spots? I swear there is. No, is there not? Okay. Josh, it's worth talking to you about this one, because this song's super old, isn't it? I mean, the sort of origins of this song.
Yeah, I have a demo from about 8 years ago where it just started life as like an electronic ambient thing I was just messing around with.
Bloody hell.
And I was never going to do anything with it, and then it was just like, well, just see how that sounds if you make it really heavy. Something I wanted to experiment with was, as well as the different like sounds or styles, like just different types of like melody or like chord progressions, just a bit weirder, and not in any sort of like geeky theory way, but just like experiment with, like the chord progression is just a bit weird and a bit sinister. So it was another thing where I was like, this might be wrong for Architects. We might not. It might just feel wrong because it's a bit different from a melodic standpoint, or like the chords and that kind of thing. But it turned out to be like really cool. Like one of my favourites.
I think it was really important that if we were going to have some really heavy tracks on the record, we didn't just revert back to a familiar, safe formula that we had already done, and we felt like we wanted to still break new ground. It wasn't all just about, injecting the songs with more melody. It was about shifting the entire sound of the band to a certain degree.
And not that I can, I can't think of anyone that it sounds like. Not that I'm saying it's the most original thing ever, but like as a heavy song on the record, I don't think that I can like pinpoint it stylistically, like to like reference another band, which is what most artists do. You go, well, we like this band, so that's who you reference. But it feels really kind of fresh.
Although
for a heavy song,
the breakdown in it, we never would have been. It's like we wouldn't have been brave enough in ourselves to do something that simple before.
That's quite a contrast.
Okay, it's got to be more complicated than this, and that was kind of our attitude. Our career has just been sort of this loosening of the boundaries in with us, between ourselves. We've always felt like, there's things we can't do because it can't be too simple. And this album was a lot about being like, okay, well, this is just really basic, but it's really impactful. And I mean, that's what that breakdown is. It's not rocket science, but it more than does the job.
I was talking about the verses before. The breakdown's pretty, like familiar and straightforward. But like you said, like if it feels right, then just go with it and not care about.
Yeah, I think we even had a conversation, when we're at the end of the process and we were looking at, well, what does the album need? What could be changed? That sort of pre-production stage of the writing. I think that we had a conversation. Is that too basic? Well, do we like it? Yeah. Does it hit really hard? Yeah, I mean, that's what you want in a breakdown, isn't it? You want it to hit really hard, and that's exactly what it does. And obviously, Winston sort of just enhanced that as well, And I think, obviously, the singer of Parkway Drive singing on Architect's song, it would have been a shame for the metalcore elite if we hadn't done what we've done, and us. It was, doing that it's just fun, isn't it? But it's also, sort of feels almost like taking candy from a baby doing something like that, because it would be so simple to do a record filled with that, obviously. But I think the fact that we just are peppering the album with those moments is what makes it hit so hard as well.
Yeah, that's it. It's almost sort of like a less is more. If you have something like that breakdown over every single song, it's not got the same impact, has it? It's I think also what's really cool is Winston is a really wonderful guy, and was obviously part of a really fantastic band. But actually, that band has done so much for us, and did so much for us during a tricky time of touring with Tom, and they really went out of their way to make sure that he was getting everything that he needed when we were touring with them. And I think all of us were really taken aback by just how much they went out of their way, and their crew went out of their way to look after us during that period. So it was really nice to have him be on a song and that friendship be solidified in music, and that will be there forever.